guys, you're listening to Vol. This video is going to be quite a rare one because I'm not going to be covering a battle report. I'm going to be simply talking about strategy and tactics in Infinity. We're going to be examining some common situations and talking about actually how to play better in Infinity to benefit people who are either a bit newer to the game and don't really know what to do. They may know the basic mechanics but just not really sure what to do during a game to get an advantage. But also to those players who have been playing for a while and maybe are making mistakes or plays that feel intuitive but aren't actually helping them. Now, I'm pretty sure you can ignore this video if you're already a decent Infinity player. Don't think that I'm belittling anybody or talking down to people who already know these things that I'm going to be going over. So let's just get started. Let's just jump straight into it. Many of you played the starter set, Operation Ice Storm. You can see the 3 Nomads, and I'll also feature a picture here with the 3 Fusiliers. And one of the things that you encounter straight away in Infinity is that when you spend an order on a guy and he moves around into line of sight of an enemy trooper, your opponent can shoot back. So the active turn and the reactive turn, it's both very dangerous, and sometimes you can move a guy to attack and get shot by your opponent. Now, intuitively, what a lot of people take away from this is that they should be creating situations where when their opponent is moving out, they can attack back. So putting guys just next to corners, being able to shoot past, or next to walls, to create arrows, to hold fire lanes, to do those sorts of things. Now, if you only take one thing away from this video, just take this away. If it's your opponent's turn, if you are in your reactive turn and it's your opponent actually spinning the orders, you are in damage control mode. You don't actually want to be in face-to-face situations to begin with. You don't actually want to be putting your guys in positions where your enemy can easily attack you. Let's go through the reasoning and thinking behind that. And remember, of course there are exceptions. Of course there are some times where it is actually okay to do that and better to do that. But most of the time it isn't. And if you want to play safer, you should really just be putting your guys in total cover. So in a 300-point game, we're moving away from Operation Ice Storm now, but in a 300-point game, a decent opponent will have a huge variety of tools. They'll have maybe a sniper rifle or an HMG or a link team, something with tools. They'll have hacking programs, they'll have smoke potentially in some lists. So if you leave a trooper somewhere hanging around where it can be visible from a big section of the table, your opponent will pick the one tool in their army which is good at beating your guy. So if you have put up a sniper which has TO camo on it, then your opponent can actually attack that with a multispectral visor. If you've put something with short range, your opponent can use a longer range gun to kill it. If your opponent has picked a really long, if you've picked a really long range guy, your opponent will maybe attack with an infiltrator in a closer range span. So you're allowing your opponent to solve the problem. You aren't really in most cases, you're not really providing a problem that they can't solve, is what I'm trying to get at there. Another big tip is to make use of this website called the Dice Calculator. Whereabouts is it? Infinity Dice Calculator. I will put a link to it in this video. Check it out. If you haven't used it before, have a play around with it and actually have a look at how bad it is for you if you have, say, a normal trooper with a sniper rifle or an HMG up against your opponent who's in a good range band with cover using a gun that has high burst. It's just not very good odds at all. One very common tactic in this game is to put down smoke first and then move out with an MSV trooper and shoot at your guy. And even if you have an MSV as well, that allows your opponent just to isolate your one model, and they'll have their 3 or 4 dice against your 1. So that's just something to bear in mind, guys. Don't try and leave guys out to create arrows unless you really know what you're doing. Even if they're armed with a sniper rifle or a machine gun or something really powerful, your opponent, if they know what they're doing, will actually come from an angle of attack that will counter you, that will beat you. So next up, let's actually have a talk about a situation here where we'll look at the photo where we've got a NIST sniper in the top left, and then the bottom right we've got a Rui Shui. The sniper's got MSV. So if we put down smoke first, that's not going to work too well. But the thing is, the Ruishui comes around the corner, and if it comes within 24 inches, which it looks like it is here, or it can come a bit further if it needs to, it's getting +3 bonus, so both sides are getting +3. The Ruishui could be given a hacking program, Enhanced Fire, which ignores cover, and although the NIS is hitting on a 13 or less, and the Ruishui may be hitting on, say, a 12 or a 15 if it has the hacking program up, it's got 4 dice to that 1. Now, sure, let's say you play a game where your opponent gets lucky and hits the dice that he needs, and you miss with your dice and you get negated by his roll, and afterwards you think, oh man, I'm really regretful of the fact that I took that Roshui. I shouldn't have actually attacked there. No, of course you should have. What you are doing is you're perceiving the outcome without actually looking at the expected value of the outcome. You're not actually looking at it in terms of what was the probability involved. You know, if you were going to be doing this again, of course you should do it again if that situation comes up. Generally, more burst is better if the dice required are fairly level. So what about total reaction bots? Let's have a talk about those, because this is again a bit of a stumbling block. I think that some people, once they have played enough Infinity, to realize that they don't just leave guys, hanging around for their opponent to easily pick on. Once they get past that stage, they are hiding their troops, going prone with them, keeping them in total cover. But when it comes to total reaction bots, I still see people just leaving their total reaction bot out in the middle of the table where it can see as much stuff as it can, because every time the enemy spends an order coming into line of sight of it, you get 4 shots straight away, and it's a decent range band of 16 to 32. Now, I think this is a terrible play. I think that using your total reaction bot in this way is a mistake. Because, like I said earlier, your opponent can just pick the one model in their army which is going to be most decisive against the total reaction bot. You can put down smoke first, move up with MSV, then shoot it, okay? Yes, of course, the total reaction bot still has that, 20% or roughly 20% chance of getting a crit. Yes, that's the case, but the vast majority of the time, 60 to 70% of the time, you're just going to lose the total reaction bot. And if the total reaction bot does get a crit, your opponent can just try again with something else. And quite often, a smart player will use a heavy infantry model to attack it first. So if you get your one crit, they can try again and potentially kill it, and then maybe even have a doctor as well. So your chance of winning that trade-off is 20% off 20% kind of thing. And even then, if they've got a healer on the infantry, it's just going to crush them. So again, your decision to put the total reaction bot out here in this situation was just a mistake. The other reason why it can be really terrible is that your opponent might have a camo trooper that's an infiltrator, or a TO camo trooper that's a hidden deployment that you didn't even realize. And let's say it's a Crocman Fort Observer, and they come out of camo to surprise shot you, and you're up against TO camo and cover. And if because they're an infiltrator, they've moved to the middle of the table where you are within 16 inches, you're at -12 to hit, and it's actually a 0% chance of winning there. The Crocman just shoots you and laughs, and you've lost your total reaction bot. So if you are new to Infinity, or if you have been playing Infinity a while and you're still putting your total reaction bot out where your opponent with his whole army can just choose the right thing to kill it, you're just making a mistake, and you're making it harder for yourself to win. So how do you use total reaction bots? Do you just remove them from your list? Well, if you're me, in most cases I do just remove them from my list, but there are some cases where they can actually be quite good. Suppose you just wait with them, and 25.1 SWC1, but you're generating an order every turn. That's okay. That's actually not so bad, because in the later stage of the game, you can move your TR bot around to a position where your opponent has lost half their army now. There's been a lot of firefights, and they've lost some of the key tools that they might have used to beat your TR bot. They may be left with some cheerleaders and specialists to go after objectives, and now your TR bot could really shine. It can move out and actually cover objectives which your opponent might now be going after. Also, while you're waiting at the back and just generating orders and not really doing very much, you're also protecting your back line from Rambos and people like Van Zandt and Airborne deployment troopers, which will now have to contend with their TR bot if they come around the side. It gives you more to play with. So that's how I would use a TR bot if you're going to bother to use a TR bot. What about Suppression Fire? We see people use Suppression Fire an awful lot. Well, it depends how you use Suppression Fire. If you are, like I said before, just suppression fire in a random area, you don't have any specific plan in mind, you're just doing it for the sake of an order or a coordinated order in some cases, what then? Let's have a look at this Aquila Guard who is got cover, he's Ballistic Skill 15, he's got MSV 3, and let's pretend that he's in Suppression Fire, so anything coming down the street here at him is going to suffer from that. So next photo, let's have a look at this. This is all the way on the other side of the battlefield. We've got a crane with Spitfire and X-Visor. So the crane now just shoots the Aquila Guard. The Aquila Guard will break Suppression Fire if he shoots back, because it's further away than 24 inches. The crane will be hitting on, 10s with 4 dice. The Aquila, because in this particular shot it's more than 32 inches, will be hitting on 15 minus 6, 9s. So would you rather have 4 dice with 10s to hit or 1 dice with 9s? Obviously you're better in this situation as the crane, and simply by just attacking this position the Aquila Guard loses. So your opponent can beat Suppression Fire by attacking from a long way away. Here's another example where you're up against Combined Army, and we've got the Umbra Legate with White Noise advanced hacking device, and he just puts the White Noise down. Aquila Guard can't even see through that, so you could even move closer and just keep doing it and get into combat and destroy him that way. Here's another image where a Spectre, possibly a Spectre in hidden deployment, is standing on the other side of the crate from him. Now, if he walks around the corner, yes, he's got TO camo, but MSV3 is going to ignore that. However, what a smart opponent can do, just to abuse the rules here, yes, this is legal, guys, what I'm about to say, is you spend your first short skill just idling, and because the Aquila Guard does not have Sixth Sense level 2, he can't delay his ARO, so he either has to forfeit his ARO or use it to change phase dodge, even though he's in Suppression Fire. And then, as you can see from the ruler I've put out here, the Spectre uses its second short skill to move out into close combat, and the Aquila can't even shoot at all. So by going in Suppression Fire here, you're not really achieving anything. Your opponent just walks around the corner and gets into close combat with you. I know it sounds silly, but that is something you can do in Infinity, and it does make close combat units a bit better. So what about Suppression Fire then? Again, I think you should use Suppression Fire later in the game when you can cover off various different angles and slow down your opponent once they've run out of tools. If you use it in your first turn, and I see a lot of people aggressively putting Suppression Fire down, where they move guys into the middle of the table and put Suppression Fire down, they go, haha, you attack me, and they haven't actually killed anything in their first turn, they've just moved stuff up and put themselves in Suppression Fire. Well, that's just a gift to your opponent. Your opponent, again, just picks the models that they want to use to counter your Suppression Fire, and if they know what they're doing, that's what's going to happen. Now, again, don't play on the assumption that your opponent is a bad player. Don't play on the assumption that your opponent is going to make mistakes, because if you play Infinity that way, or any other wargame that way, you'll only ever beat the weaker players. You won't ever actually stand a chance against people who make tactical decisions correctly. Let's have another look at something else now. We've got a Swiss Guard with HMG standing behind a crate, and we've got a Sujian, another heavy infantry model, moving around to get line of sight. So it's the Yuching player's turn, and I want you to imagine that he's got 6 orders left in this order pool, and the Sujian has just spent a short skill walking around here. So if you are the Swiss Guard player, what do? You can ARO with a pistol. You can ARO with your HMG, which does more damage, but at a -3 rather than a +3 for the range. Or you can dodge. Now your opponent, depending on what you do, may shoot at you with a heavy pistol, so that's +3 to hit, but -6 for TO camo. May shoot with the Spitfire, which is going to be 0 range band, but -6 for TO camo. I'm assuming that based on the angles here, no cover is allowed. But Spitfire with 4 dice, by the way. Or he might use his light flamethrower. Now bear in mind that if the light flamethrower hits the Swiss Guard, the TO camo is going to be reduced to mimetism. So you might want to pause the video if you don't know what to do here. Have a think about it. Now, here's what to do if you are the Swiss Guard player. You don't shoot the pistol, you don't shoot the HMG, and you don't declare a dodge. What you actually declare here is an engage. The reason for that is that an engage roll counts as a dodge. So, if your opponent shoots the flamethrower, that means that you have a chance of actually getting into close combat with them. The value of that is that with your physical stat being above 10, you'll have a greater than 50% chance of actually succeeding and avoiding the flamethrower and getting into combat. And, as I said earlier, the Yu Ching player's still got 6 orders, so what you do here is you stop him from actually going on a rampage with his 6 orders. If you just simply dodge, your Yu Ching opponent just keeps attacking you, and if you've chosen a dodge by itself, he won't use the flamethrower because he knows that his chances of hitting you are less than 50%. Instead, he'll use probably the Spitfire or the heavy pistol because that will give him greater chances of actually negating your roll. If you roll a 1 for your dodge and he gets any hits whatsoever, your dodge is negated. Whereas if you roll a 1 to dodge and he uses the flamethrower, well, his entire attack is negated, if you guys can understand that. But once you're in close combat, the thing is, the Swiss Guard is slightly better at close combat than the Sujian. And even if he does win the close combat attack, you've got heavy armor, you might be able to defend that off, and he'll still need to get 2 wounds through. So your chance of actually weathering the storm and actually surviving till the next turn where you can bring a friend in to help you out in close combat and win and fend him off is much, much higher. So when it's your reactive turn and you're wondering which ARO to use, just consider all of the options. Think about all of your guns, think about dodge, which gives you another 2-inch move, or even engage in the situation, which is optimal. Okay, so in this next picture, I want to have a look at a deployment situation where on the right-hand side we've got a NIS sniper, and we've got a Aquila Guard which is prone on the other building, and then we've got a trauma dock, and we've got a Pelbot linked to the trauma dock. The one thing I like about this deployment situation is that the NIS is prone, so later in the game you can stand up and become, a decent ARO generator, but in the early part of the game you're just holding on to them, so if your opponent moves out and leaves anything out in the open, you can stand up and shoot it. Also, if you are going to be up against a tough target like the TR bot we talked about before, or a linked team, or something which has a lot of clout, and if you get unlucky in your face-to-face roll when you attack with a NIS and get shot, you can then move the Pelbot around from behind this crate and actually revive him with the trauma dock. But the trauma dock's effectively doing the same thing with the Aquila Guard, so the Aquila Guard may need to move down the ladder and move out into the battlefield, but if he falls as a result of a pretty bad sort of conflict, the trauma dock can go to his rescue. The other thing as well is that when a model gets shot and goes unconscious, it also goes prone, so your opponent can't spend any further orders just removing you unless of course they have shock. Shock won't work on the Aquila Guard, by the way, so the positioning of this doctor is actually quite strong. Drop troops, airborne deployment. It's not really a good idea to try and land them using the template and just pick a land of the template, an area of the battlefield to drop them down, because your opponent can use hackers to hack the aircraft. You may fail the physical check, and if you do and you disperse, it's very likely that you will just die or be relegated to the back of your deployment zone. So what you should do is bring them on the side. In this particular case, we've got an Akali Sea Commando with a Spitfire, and what you can do is you can find the shadow of line of sight, as I like to call it, where you are as close to the enemy as you can, but without actually being initially in line of sight. But then when you spend your next order, you can move straight into line of sight. It doesn't really matter if you don't have cover, because with Burst 4 and Ballistical 13 and +3 range for the range band, you're really going to make short work of these guys here. In fact, if you look at the next image, you can sort of see from eye level where the Akali is, and there's nothing that can see him at this point. Now, again, in a real game, there'd generally be more stuff covering the sides, but here's a really important point that I want you to pause and consider. If your opponent is making the mistake that I talked about earlier, where they're leaving guys out in the open to create arrows to block you from putting down your airborne troopers and things like that, then you can use your best long-range tool to kill them in turn 1. And it cuts through their order pool, it leaves them fewer tools to work with later in the game, and you're winning. However, if they do the smarter thing and keep their troops in total cover, that allows you to bring in a drop trooper and actually come around the side and therefore go after them that way. So that's why I build most of my lists quite aggressively, where I have something which can actually cut through long-range situations, as well as an aggressive infiltrator or a drop trooper. For example, let's say I'm playing Pan-Oceania. Maybe I'll take a Swiss Guard with HMG and one of these Akalis, because In a situation like that, if my opponent is leaving guys out to shoot at wherever the Akali's going to come on, well, the Swiss just goes after that and easily rips it to pieces, and then the Akali comes on. If I'm playing Yu Ching, I'll usually use a Ru Shui with also a Celestial Guard Link team with a smoke grenade launcher so they can put the smoke down, blocking those lines of sight, bringing on a drop trooper, or even just moving the Ru Shui into the smoke and then killing whatever's in the midfield. Speaking of the Ru Shui, when you're moving a remote around the battlefield, don't forget that most of your remotes have repeaters. Also, when you're thinking about hacking, just be very careful about the ramifications of choosing what you're choosing. In a situation like this, let's just imagine we're the Nomad player and we had a Spectre with an assault hacking device in hidden deployment. If the Ru Shui moves up with its first short skill and you pop out of your hidden deployment situation, your state, you can't actually hack any of their hackers because it's only the Ru Shui generating an ARO. If it's your active turn, you can hack through the repeater, especially if you've got a killer hacker device, makes it even easier to kill the hackers. But if it's your opponent's turn, it's the Yu Ching's turn, and they move up with their short skill, and you appear here and try and hack the Ru Shui, you leave yourself vulnerable to their hackers because they've got a repeater. If you used disable comms here, you get rid of their repeater. That works really well here. If you just used a basilisk or something, you shut down and freeze the bot, but then their very next order can be spent on hacking your model, which is now revealed. But if you didn't do that, if you stayed either in hidden deployment or marker form, you're currently not hackable. So if their bot comes next to you like that, you are safe. They can't actually hack you in that way. So do bear that in mind, guys, when you are playing around with hackers and remotes and repeaters. Next up, template weapons, chain rifles especially. So we've got chain rifles, nanopulsers, and flamethrowers, and pulsars and whatnot. Chain rifles being the most common. The most powerful thing about a chain rifle is that when you are reacting with it, your opponent spends their short skill to move into line of sight, and then they either take a free hit or they have to dodge, effectively wasting the order. So that's why chain rifles are so good on the defensive. That's why skirmishing warbands, the Guangxi, the Dachiratsi, even the Jaguars are just really, really excellent troopers. If you're going after them in the active turn, chain rifles aren't quite that good if your opponent knows to dodge. So let's pretend this is the combined army player's turn. Moves the Dachiratsi around the corner, and the Fusilier lieutenant, let's say, reacts with a dodge. Well, if you fire your chain rifle, not only does he have a chance of passing the dodge, he's got a chance of passing the armor save as well. So the chances of him surviving are pretty good, well over 70%. Or thereabouts, maybe not exactly. So what you should do instead is if you move around the corner and your opponent dodges, you should shoot the pistol with the Dachiratsi because you're getting +3 to hit from short range. If your blister skill is very low, it doesn't matter. You got 2 dice against your opponent's 1 dice, and the odds are actually quite favourable that you'll get that through and get a kill. However, if it's the Panoshana player's turn and he's moving this Fusilier around, then you need a chain rifle. Don't react with a pistol, just chain rifle him because that will force a trade which is favourable for you. Impetuous troops. Impetuous is something which often results in a cost reduction to your trooper. So Dachiratsi, Witch Soldiers, Guangxi and the like cost less, even though they generate an order. And that's because they pay this tax, this penalty of not benefiting from cover. Now, a lot of people think that the other downside of them is that they also are obliged to actually move forward towards the nearest enemy and then get shot. But if you're clever about it, if you play them well, you don't have to worry about that as much. This guy being deployed here can declare an idle in a move as his impetuous order, and that won't take him past this purple crate, so he'll be fine. In these other pictures I'm going to show you, the Dachiratsi have been deployed well out in the open, but they've got buildings in front of them, so the enemy just doesn't get line of sight to this part of the table. So in your turn, you just move 4 inches and they are still alive to generate an order next turn. If your opponent is hidden away and there's nobody nearby, then you can just move, again, you can use 2 short skill moves to get closer to them. If you're at the edge of the table here, if you can predict where your enemies are mostly going to be, and you know whether the Dachiratsi is going to be moving to the left or to the right, that can also benefit you as well. So I hope you guys learned a few things through this video. Again, if there's only one thing you can take away, when you're deploying, deploy defensively. Keep your guys in total cover. There are some exceptions to the rule. Sometimes you'll want to set up a trap where you've got a link team with a missile launcher and a Hexa sniper in deployment, and you want to fool them into actually thinking they've got the better odds when they attack your one guy and you reveal your sniper and shoot them. Other times you may just be up against a particular army list which doesn't really feature the right tools to beat your NIST sniper or your DASU sniper, and you might want to put a guy on top of a building because they just don't they neglected to bring the things that would require that. Also, it is okay to generate AROs and hold fire lanes when they're on the flanks and through certain denser terrain areas where it's harder for your opponent to bring that tool that they need to beat you. But that just takes time, and it takes skill and takes understanding. If you're new to Infinity, or if you're not doing very well at Infinity, I would thoroughly recommend just use a lot of prone, use a lot of total cover situations, and hold those orders back so that you can last throughout the game.